Hey you guys, fun little video for today. I've pulled up a bunch of games, all of which were over within 10 moves. Now this is all good entertainment. I've got about 14 games and we go up the ratings, okay, starting at 750 here and work our way upwards. But the key is, that what I want you to take away from this is that no matter who your opponent is, people can play sloppy moves in the opening, right? So if you are a person who always just knocks out the same moves over and over again, you need to stop that, because you've got to be responding to what your opponent is doing. In chess, if you want to win the game, there's an opportunity to win the game within 10 moves, you should go ahead and do that. Why waste another half an hour, right? So if your opponent does make sloppy moves, creates opportunities, then you need to keep your eyes open for that. Okay, so let's start with today's dose of inspiration. So here I've got the white pieces. It's a 20-minute rapid game. My opponent is rated 751, okay? And we have the centre game, so leading to the Danish gambit. There you go, the Danish gambit with c3, takes, bishop out. So we don't have the full Danish because he hasn't captured on here, allowing me to recapture with a bishop, but he brings his knight out to f6. Now, anytime you bring your knight out and there's a pawn here ready to jump in and kick the knight, it's generally a good idea to do that if you can. Generally not a good idea to put your knight in that situation, because now the knight has to move. Okay. And now queen to f3. Okay, and can you see the threat? This is move 6 of the game, right? So yes, my queen's looking at this pawn, my queen's looking at this knight, but importantly, my queen is now free to look down on the the f7 square. Okay, knight comes back here, so now the knight looks like a decent move. The knight's attacking the queen and defending f7, but it's in the line of my dark squared bishop, so I take out the knight, and now c6 is pushed, and boom, checkmate, move 8, good night, thank you very much. Let's move on to game number 2. We are now up to 8-6-9. Here I've got the black pieces. We have e4, e5, and then f3. Generally not the most advisable opening. You've moved the f-pawn, you've created a diagonal towards the king, and because black here has also moved the e-pawn, the queen is free to come out. Oh, we don't do this yet. First, the bishop comes out, looking down this diagonal as well. Knight to c3, knight to e7. The unusual knight h3 now. And here I decide to grab the center. It's that square d5 is attacked twice but defended twice. Takes, knight takes, and we trade knights. Now I've got a nice aggressive central queen. Take out the knight first, and can you spot the threat here? And it's all because this pawn has moved. All right, when did this pawn move? Very unusual choice of move there. Okay, so we take out the knight. So now there's no real chance of castling kingside, but the threat is queen d4. Very simple, queen d4. Looking at this rook here, but also crucially, again, it's the same square, f2 and f7, time and time again. These are the pawns that are defended only by the king at the start of the game. White notices the threat against the rook, but doesn't notice the threat against the king, and it's all over on move 9. Let's move on to the next one. Now we're in the 900s. We have e4, e5, d4, again. Lots of quick wins in the Danish. Now this is a huge mistake again, moving this king's bishop's pawn. Don't want to do that, and let's just see how horribly wrong it goes. So d takes e5, f takes e5, now queen h5 check. Okay, so there's only, I think, 2 legal moves. Either the king has to move to e7, king can't go there, or the pawn comes to g6. Now if the pawn comes to g6, queen takes e5, and there's a fork on the king and the rook. So here, king to e7, queen takes e5 anyway with check. There, check now with the light squared bishop, And boom. Look at that. Checkmate on move 7. With the king going on a walk and black has no development whatsoever. Indeed. Absolutely gorgeous. So this diagonal here is all covered by this bishop. The queen's defended by the pawn. There's nowhere for the king to go. Absolute stunner. Okay. There we go. Right, now we're over the 1000s. Okay, my opponent starts with the reti, and I just mirror. Okay, so now we are in actually a very normal king's knight situation. And now this is the Re Lopez. I bring out my knight to f6, takes, and d takes. Okay, that does hang this pawn. Right, but white now plays d3. I bring out my bishop, h3, black castles. Now the knight takes the pawn. Okay. Queen d4. Right, threatening the knight, and guess what? The old Achilles heel, f2 square. Knight moves. Okay, but as we've seen again, the old sniper. And again, this is something we've been talking about recently. One of the reasons why you can develop your bishops later is that they can actually have quite an impact. Because they are a long-range piece, they can have an impact right from the bench. They don't actually have to deploy in order to be able to take part in the game. Now in this instance I capture with a knight, but I could easily have captured with a bishop. Recaptures and checkmate again on f2. Right? Really is the soft underbelly. Right, now we're in the 1100s. And we have the French. Now this is an unusual one. Sorry, d3 on the second move. Yeah, it's defending this knight, sorry, this pawn on e4, but it's also blocking in this bishop. And, okay, so I come here, takes, and we have a kind of an exchange variation. Bishop to e2, knight out to f6, knight f3, pin the knight, knight retreats. Okay, all of this looks very normal right now, right? We're on move 6. Queen to e7 now pins this bishop. This bishop can no longer move. And white here decides that he can go ahead and castle. But the problem is that the king was on e1 and was defending this bishop. So this bishop did have 2 defenders. Now it's attacked twice. Okay. So here I just capture the bishop with my bishop. Now white could here have played rook e1, kind of pinning my bishop. Okay, so if rook e1, I take his queen, he takes my queen, I take his rook. He's down in material. Instead he puts his queen here, I grab the rook, and I'm simply up a rook, and white resigns on move 9. Okay, it just goes to show how quickly a game can fall apart when you make sloppy moves in the opening. I see a lot of lower rated players really bang out their opening moves and then sit and start to take a minute and a half over their moves later on in the game. That really is not a good way to go about it. You want to be using about a third of your time on the opening. Alright, so next one. Still in the 1100s, and now we are in the Vienna territory. Quiet c6. Now this isn't a bad move. I mean, it does take away this key square for the knight and this one. Okay, but it is on the quiet side, and the c-pawn does nothing to release any bishops. Okay, so bishop c4, bishop b4, queen out now. Where are we looking? Of course, the soft underbelly of f7. Takes, boom, checkmate, good night, thank you very much, move 5. Okay, and I think that was a 15-minute game, and black lost that one with having used only 31 seconds. Right, it's still in the 1100s. I've got the black pieces now, and this is the old Benoni, something that I've been playing with recently. Pawn takes, which is not the best move from white, by the way. Now e6, preparing to develop this bishop, looking at the vulnerable pawn, and white attempts to defend the pawn, generally not a good idea against gambits. Okay, a5 now looks like it's going to take out the defender of the pawn, so c3 makes a lot of sense. Now takes, and queen f6. Okay, this is standard old Benoni theory. Okay, and I'm looking all the way down the diagonal at this rook that cannot move. The only way to defend it is Well, you can put the bishop here, lose the bishop. So really the only thing is that white actually resigns straight away here. It's possible to move the knight there, and then queen takes the knight, and then bishop here. Okay, so that the queen is defending the rook, but you're already down a piece at this point, and my opponent has resigned at that point. So there we go, into the 1200s. My opponent from India. This is a 5-minute blitz game. Okay, so e4, c5, the Sicilian, and at the moment I am toying with the wing gambit with immediate b4. Okay, great way to knock your Sicilian players off their pedestal. They don't know what to do. Okay, so e6, we saw that in the old Benoni just now, releasing the bishop, but now this is defending this pawn. I'll grab the pawn anyway, bishop comes out, d4, attacking the bishop, okay, with tempo, okay, and occupying the center as well. So probably the right move there. Bishop retreats, queen to g4 now, looking at this sensitive square here, which is now undefended, seeing as the bishop is on walkabout. Black now throws in a queen check, but it's not a very good one. I had c3, or here bishop d2 actually blocks the check and comes with tempo again. So now the queen is going to have to move, or the bishop's going to have to block, and the bishop blocks. All right, now I then grab the pawn on g7, now attacking the rook, which is indefensible now, and black decides, remember black is rated 1295, okay, and failed to count attackers and defenders. Bishop takes bishop, I recapture. Well, okay, it doesn't fail, so it's an equal trade. 2 attackers, 2 defenders, right? So we trade pieces. Queen now comes in looking at my rook, and I put my rook across to d1. Now there's no way to defend this, and then there's going to be no way to defend the knight. The queen is the only piece out on the board, and the queen, as we've already seen, can be a target when that happens. So good lesson there in not bringing out your queen too early. Having said that, I kind of did the same, didn't I? So queen out here, but you know, I've got a soft target. This is a genuine target, okay? This is not a target. This is a check for the sake of throwing in a check, and you just get kicked away. This is no threat either, so I get my prize, which is the g7 pawn and the rook, and there's simply no way to defend. And that's it, resigns. Okay, we've got 5 more to go. Okay, here's another 1200. e4, e5, Vienna game. And then the teensy-wincy quiet a6. Not a great move. Bishop out to c4, bishop out to c5. And now when we see that bishop come out and the knight isn't here to defend this pawn, you can throw in queen h5. It's not a check, but we are threatening, again, f7. All right? Now, note, this is a 15-minute game. My opponent has used so far 12 seconds. Okay? Now, d6 is played. Boom. Checkmate. On move 5. All done. He's used 18 seconds. He's got 14 minutes, 42 left. He's not going to be feeling very happy with himself after that one. Okay, now, this isn't the game that I played. This is a subscriber. And they're both in the 1100s. So, we have the Piet's defense. Okay, e4 and d6. Now d4, knight f6, queen out. G7, so we're now preparing fianchetto the bishop, castle kingside. Pretty normal. Okay, and bishop out to c4. Okay, so now this knight can't move here because he's guarding f7, preventing queen takes f7 checkmate. Well, it's not quite checkmate. I guess the king has got one escape square there. But now bishop to g7 anyway. And now, this is fascinating. We've already said that this knight is more or less pinned, okay? Because it's got to defend that. Now, you are black. The game is over within the next 3 moves. So black to play and to try and win. Can you figure out how black can rescue this situation. Okay, so clearly the knight is under threat. There's also a threat of the queen coming into f7, forcing the king here, and then bishop here would simply, well, it would force the king out here again. So it's going to be absolutely horrible whatever happens here. So first of all, show you what black does. Take the pawn, take the pawn. Now, why this? Well, look, it's actually opened up the whole d-file, possibly for the queen, but the queen has no defense. Okay, well, look at this. Bishop to g4, attacking white's queen. All right, now the queen can't take the knight because the pawn will just recapture. Okay, so what does white do? Just moves the queen to f4. And queen d1, lovely checkmate. Okay, completely turn the tables. And this is quite common when you've got a player that gets so excited about his own attack that everything else just goes out the window. It's like you can't possibly get sucker punched if you're, you know, that's the thought process that you go through, right? Sure, I can't lose this game. It's only a question of how I'm going to win it and how quickly I'm going to win it. But with a move like this, that's just a blunder. So there are other options here. I think, yeah, queen d3 looks playable. Defended by the bishop, defended by the pawn. Propose a trade of queens. That would be okay, but this, simple blunder. Okay. Okay, next one here. My opponent's rated 1300. And we have e4, e5. Knight to c3, the Vienna game. Bishop out, wayward queen attack. Knight here. Okay, so you can see this kind of blinkered problem that my opponent is looking at queen takes there, but that's not a threat. That pawn is already defended by the king. There's no bishop out. There's no knight out, right? I guess the knight could come to here and attack that square, right? But that's the threat. Queen takes e5 check, forking the king and the bishop. So there's only one real move. Bishop back to e7. Queen takes g7. Rook moves to save itself. I grab the knight. I grab a pawn. Bring out my knight, and my opponent goes, this is hopeless. I resign. Okay? So 1300. Takes no time at all. I think this is a 5 plus 10 game, and he's finished with 5 minutes 45 on the clock. Okay, final one. My opponent here is rated 1479. e4, e5, the Vienna, knight c3. Okay, Vienna gambit, accepted. Great. e5 kicks the knight, and you notice here the knight actually has no safe squares other than going back. Okay, there's only one real alternative move, which is queen e7. Then you play queen e2. Okay, removing the pin on the pawn. So now the pawn attack is on, and the knight has to move back to g8. Okay, now d4 and d6. Right, now check this out. Knight to d5. I've actually got a whole video on a game that went down this kind of line. Knight to d5. You don't want to be, I mean, this is playable. Take the pawn, maybe queen's trade, or knight takes. You're kind of okay. But this is deadly, right? Knight to d5. So we're hitting the queen. We're also threatening c7. And c7 is vulnerable because of the fork on the king and rook, okay? So the queen's going to have to move somewhere. Queen goes here. And now, what's the next move? E takes d6, okay? And this comes with a discovered check by the queen. We're also threatening to capture there, either with a pawn or even with a knight as well. So the king now moves across, and now, because the king's moved there, pawn takes c7, right? The king is in check again. The king can't move there, can't capture the pawn. The only legal move, I believe, at this point would be queen takes, knight takes queen, and it's all over bar the shouting. So there you go. Lovely win there on move 9 against a player rated not far shy of 1500. So that's it, guys. The lesson from this to take away is, even in the first few moves in the opening, keep your eyes open for attacking opportunities. and keep your eyes open for threats, right? I happen to pull up mostly games that I won myself, but believe me, I have fallen foul of making big mistakes in the opening myself enough times to know as well. So there you go. Be on the lookout for amazing attacking opportunities in the first 10 moves, because they do happen. Do not just automatically, like a robot, bang out your London system or your Piet's defense or whatever it is. Keep your eyes open, right? Your opponent might play something weird and unusual and funky, and they might leave a gap that you can exploit. So there you go. Enjoy. Go out there and kill it, guys. Thanks for watching. See you later.